In a hospital in California, an 82-year-old man is dying. His lungs are deteriorating. His family is frantically attempting to contact him as his body shuts down. However, they are unable to reach his bedside. They are being kept away by hospital limitations. Thus, the guy will die in solitude, having devoted his life to battling for others. Tom Laughlin is his name. He produced Billy Jack, a figure so famous that he came to represent the struggle for justice for a whole generation. His movies brought in around $200 million. He made 2 presidential runs. He defeated the Hollywood studios in a battle. Despite being informed that his cancer was incurable, he managed to survive. And Dolores Taylor, his 60-year wife, co-star, and everything, was by his side during every conflict. However, this is something no one anticipated. Dementia obliterated everything from Dolores's consciousness years after Tom passed away by himself in the hospital. The movies, the causes, and the man she has been in love with since 1954, absent. You must hear their story, even though their ending was harsh. Because Tom Laughlin lived like a hero in addition to playing one, and his transformation from a disturbed Milwaukee boy to a trailblazer who terrified Hollywood shows the true cost of standing up when society tells you to sit down. On August 10, 1931, Tom Laughlin was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. He was unique from a young age. Tom was composing plays as other children played in the streets. Tom excelled at everything, whereas his classmates concentrated on only one thing. At Washington High School, he was an exceptional football player. He was gifted enough to be awarded a scholarship to the University of Wisconsin, but he also had a strong affinity for the theater, enthralling everyone who saw him appear in plays. His life would be characterized by this blend of artistic sensibility and physical ferocity. As a safety and halfback at Marquette University, Laughlin kept up his impressive play on the football field. However, something more was simmering within him. Everything changed when he went to see a streetcar production of Desire one evening. He was struck by the performance's power, like a revelation. At that moment, he realized that acting was more than simply a hobby. He had to do something about it. Marquette, however, had different ideas for him. Laughlin was expelled from the institution after getting into a brawl during his sophomore year. Most people would have been devastated by such a setback. It became a pivotal moment for Laughlin. Now that football was out of the question, he immersed himself into his real love, to pursue his studies in radio acting, directing, and producing. He transferred to the University of South Dakota, and he met the woman who would permanently alter his life there, in that strange land. Dolores Taylor was born in Winter, South Dakota, on September 27, 1932. Her upbringing close to an Indian reservation had a significant impact on how she saw the world. Her plans to become a graphic designer for music were altered when she met Tom Laughlin at the University of South Dakota. Their passion of storytelling and performance brought them together. They were married on October 15, 1954. The partnership would endure for 59 years. Laughlin set his sights on Hollywood after finishing his schooling. All he had when he arrived in the late 1950s was talent, music, and ambition, but he soon realized that both were insufficient. The opposition persisted. Laughlin kept going to auditions, but she only got small roles in movies like South Pacific and Gig and television shows like Climax. In music forgettable situations, these were forgettable characters. Nothing that demonstrated his true abilities. There was an abundance of young performers available for roles in Hollywood. Laughlin's ambition to develop characters rather than merely play, music, them was what distinguished him. However, no one was providing him that opportunity. He battled for years. Because of the industry's intense competition, finding steady work was practically impossible. Financial instability started to accompany music all the time. The majority of performers in his shoes would have quit and returned home. Tom Laughlin wasn't like other actors. He took affairs into his own hands in 1960. The Young Sinner was an independent film on adolescent misbehavior that he wrote, directed, and starred in. It was shot in Milwaukee over the course of roughly 14 days. Despite getting mixed reviews, the movie demonstrated something significant. Laughlin had no intention of waiting for approval from Hollywood. He intended to generate his own opportunities. He would invent leading roles if the studios wouldn't give them to him. Everything that followed would be characterized by this attitude and his obstinate reluctance to accept the boundaries that others had set for him. And that choice would ultimately inspire him to produce something, music, that permanently altered American cinema. However, Billy Jack's journey started in an unexpected location. Tom saw something in a small South Dakota hamlet that would follow him for years. While visiting Dolores's hometown in South Dakota in 1954, the concept was born out of pain. Laughlin seen firsthand the treatment of Native Americans, the unfairness, the discrimination, and the way people ignored them as though they didn't exist. It infuriated him in a way that he was unable to get rid of. He began to write. Billy Jack, a half-white, half-Navajo former beret with a strong sense of justice and the martial arts prowess to support it, was the character that sprang out of his pen. All of Laughlin's energy went into that screenplay. His dissatisfaction with the system, his conviction that some battles were worthwhile, regardless of the cost, and his conviction that one individual could make a difference. However, Hollywood did not want it. The script was turned down by the studios. Too dangerous, too contentious, and too political. For more than 10 years, Billy Jack's character languished in a draw. Then, Laughlin managed to get in 1967. He produced The Born Losers, a low-budget biker movie. The narrative was straightforward. A group of young women are protected by Billy Jack from a vicious motorcycle gang. Almost nothing went into making the movie. Although no one had high expectations for it, viewers' reactions were unexpected. The Born Losers' modest production expenditures were far outweighed by its $12 million box office receipts. Hollywood was suddenly taking notice, but Laughlin no longer wanted to follow their norms. In 1971, he went all in with Billy Jack. Billy Jack defends a group of pacifist hippies who are being persecuted by the town's affluent elite in this story, which takes place in a small Arizona town. Music. The film addressed racism, police brutality, and the plight of Native American children with a directness that was unprecedented in mainstream filmmaking. However, the releasing of the movie was a struggle in and of itself. After first agreeing to release it, American International Pictures, Music, withdrew their offer, requesting that Laughlin eliminate any nudity and leave out any political elements. Music, Laughlin declined. He withheld the sound effect when the studio refused to bend, therefore making the movie a silent one that could not be screened. It was a daring and dangerous move. He eventually reached an agreement with Warner Brothers, but in 1973, he sued them and re-released the movie himself since he believed they were not adequately marketing it. Nobody could have predicted how profitable the risk would be. Billy Jack made over $98 million globally and became a cultural phenomenon. Even after accounting for inflation, it is still among the highest-grossing independent movies ever. One Tin Soldier, the theme song, rose to the top 40 of the Billboard Hot 100 and became an anthem for the counterculture movement. Later, Laughlin asserted that there were only two heroes for American adolescents at the time, Billy Jack and Ralph Nader. Dolores was by his side the entire time. Her role in the Born Losers had grown from that of a mere bystander to that of Billy Jack's love interest and moral compass, Jean "Music" Roberts. Her portrayal of Jean was revolutionary. In a society that seemed to reward neither, she was a strong, music-independent woman who advocated for justice and peace. She was nominated for a Golden Globe for Best Actress in a Drama for the performance. Billy Jack's 1974 trial, which went even further into Native American rights and social justice, marked the continuation of the Billy Jack franchise. Although audiences were unconcerned, critics were critical. Globally, the movie brought about $89 million. Throughout Laughlin's career, the gap between what fans desired and what critics believed became a recurrent issue. He wasn't producing movies for the government. The establishment had forgotten the folks he was filming. Hollywood refused to acknowledge what Tom and Dolores Laughlin had demonstrated. The studio setup was not necessary to connect with Americans. All you needed was a compelling narrative and the guts to tell it your way. However, success in music had its own set of difficulties. Furthermore, Tom Laughlin never took his success for granted. He would soon be driven into fields far beyond filmmaking by the same passion that inspired him to create Billy Jack. Even bigger stakes were seen in arenas. Tom Laughlin was not satisfied with his success. It gave him energy. The man who had made Billy Jack wasn't satisfied with only making films. Music. His goal was to transform the world. And he worked toward that objective with the same unwavering resolve. Music that had characterized his entire career. Billy Jack Goes to Washington, a 1977 version of the iconic Frank Capra movie, featured his character in the U.S. Senate. The movie examined the challenges of bringing about change in a dysfunctional system and political corruption. Music. However, the film's release was beset by distribution issues, and it did not have the same impact on viewers as the other movies. The franchise was dwindling. However, Laughlin's activity had just recently begun. In 1992, he entered the presidential race of the United States. Music. Ending the war on drugs, tax reform, and campaign finance reform were the main focuses of his agenda. In 2004, he ran again with the same platform. It was never really the point, but he never came close to winning. Laughlin had an insight that many politicians lacked. Sometimes a campaign is more valuable for pushing discussions that no one else wants to have than for winning. Laughlin and Dolores had already had a profound effect on education, even outside of politics. They had established a Montessori preschool, music, in Santa Monica, California, back in 1959. They took an innovative approach to child-centered learning. The school was featured in Time magazine in 1964 after growing to be the biggest of its kind in the U.S. Christian Brando, the son of Laughlin's musical friend Marlon Brando, was one of their pupils. However, despite its success, the institution went insolvent in 1965 and folded. Throughout Laughlin's life, this trend would recur. Innovative concepts confront the harsh realities of money. He was also an activist in Hollywood. Laughlin publicly criticized the film industry's treatment of independent filmmakers in 1984 by placing a dozen ads in Variety magazine. He criticized the studios for their tight control over distribution and commercialism. He put up a plan that would allow independent filmmakers to completely avoid the studio system and take charge of home video distribution. Laughlin had once again been ahead of his time, but the idea had failed. In the era of streaming and digital distribution, the tactics he described would eventually become normal practice. Despite everything, the Laughlins stayed close, and Tom and Dolores had 3 kids: Christina, Teresa, and Frank. While Teresa and Christina continued to uphold their principles of social justice and compassion, Frank followed his parents into the entertainment business. Laughlin prioritized his family and instilled in his kids the same sense of creativity and integrity that had driven his own life. Despite the pressures of his job and the ongoing battles he waged on several fronts, social conscience and artistic expression were fostered in the Laughlin household. Where it was required to defend your beliefs, it was anticipated. However, the public never knew the challenges that went on beneath the image of a brave maverick. Demons that would finally catch up with Tom and battles he waged alone. Throughout his life, Tom Laughlin struggled with bipolar disorder. Extreme mood fluctuations were brought on by the illness, with deep lows interspersed with bursts of inventiveness and vitality. It had an impact on his relationships, career, and general well-being. Being an independent filmmaker came with a lot of financial obligations, which were made even more difficult by the stress. Laughlin started work on The Return of Billy Jack, his 5th Billy Jack movie, in 1985. The character would battle child pornographers in New York City in the story. When the catastrophe occurred, production was in progress. Laughlin sustained a severe neck injury and a concussion while filming. Production was halted while he was recuperating. Funding ran out during the pause. The movie was never finished. Laughlin made a valiant effort to bring the project back to life for the following 20 years. He made public remarks about looking for money to complete the movie in 1996, By 2008, Music, the title had been altered to Billy Jack for President, with intentions for a new type of movie that would use computer manipulation and George W. Bush. None of it came to pass. Laughlin got terrible news in 2001. He had been found to have tongue cancer. The cancer could not be cured. His health continued to deteriorate in the years that followed, despite his website later claiming that Music, the illness, had entered remission. The man who had played an unbeatable hero was starting to show signs of weakness. Long ago vanished was the money from the Billy Jack movies. Music has suffered from legal disputes, abandoned ventures, and escalating medical expenses. Since his early days in Hollywood, Laughlin had been plagued by financial instability, which never truly went away. Although independence had allowed him to be more creative, it had also deprived him of the security that music, studio support could have offered. Laughlin's wish to see another Billy Jack movie faded over time. The money never materialized. The health issues persisted. Music, it appeared that the industry, which had previously dreaded him, had completely forgotten about him. However, he never lost hope that it would occur. Music, never gave up. Tom Laughlin was a fighter all the way to the end. However, even combatants finally run out of time. Tom Laughlin experienced severe respiratory issues in his last years. His aging and diseased lungs found it difficult to keep up. He was admitted to Los Music Robles Hospital and Medical Center in Thousand Oaks, California, on December 12, 2013. Pneumonia-related complications were the diagnosis. His health quickly deteriorated. As his body started to fail, medical personnel put him on life support. Despite their best efforts, his family was unable to be at his bedside in his last hours due to hospital regulations. In the end, the man who had dedicated his life to striving for connection and justice was denied both. Tom Laughlin passed away by himself after being removed from life support. He was 82. He was later regarded by his daughter as a real American outlaw. For a man who had never once taken the easy route, it was a worthy homage. Dolores Taylor outlived her husband by almost 5 years. However, a distinct kind of tragedy characterized those years. Her memories started to be stolen by dementia. Her delivery of the lines was flawless. The movies she had contributed to, she had been in love with him for almost 60 years. Her memories of Tom were also destroyed by the illness that took her mind. Dolores Taylor died on March 23, 2018, at the age of 85. Tom and Dolores left behind 3 kids and a collection of movies that made viewers reevaluate their views on equality, fairness, and the bravery required to stand up for what's right. The Billy Jack movies weren't flawless. There was much for reviewers to gripe about, yet viewers grasped something that the critics failed to notice. These movies addressed those who didn't feel heard or seen. They provided the silenced with a voice. Character development was not all that Tom Laughlin did. He started a movement. He gave voice to the voiceless and demonstrated that even seemingly untouchable systems may be challenged by one person with sufficient conviction. Dolores Taylor, his partner in every sense of the term, stood by his side at every turn. She was more than his spouse. She was his best ally, his conscience, and his partner. They did not have the joyful ending they deserved. Limitations in the hospital, dementia, and last loneliness. Everything they had created together was being taken away by the brutality of time. But their tale, the story of two Midwesterners who fought for what they believed in music, and who fought Hollywood and America. That tale lives on. It is irreplaceable. Perhaps that is what Tom and Dolores Laughlin's true legacy is. Not the money they earned, the accolades they received, or even the movies in which their music transformed a generation. Perhaps it's just a reminder that when they don't give up, regular people can accomplish incredible things. When they decide to fight despite the odds being against them. When they love one another through decades of success, heartbreak, and all the in-between. Do you enjoy the Billy Jack movies and Tom Laughlin? Do you believe that any actor nowadays possesses the bravery and inventiveness to craft their own legendary persona in the same manner as he did? Tell us in the comments section. Additionally, if this tale touched you, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next installment.